All right, still talking about campaigns and elections and that sort of theme here in Unit 5, which is about political participation. And the next question we're looking at is structural barriers to third parties. Why is it that we have Democrats and Republicans and almost never you hear about Libertarian Party or the Green Party? You don't really hear much about these other third parties. They almost never win. It's rare that they win. Maybe if they do win, it's in like some weird local election, but they don't really win anything nationally. Why is that? So let's look at that. Why what's that reason? 5.17 structural barriers to third parties. Pause every time you need to. All right, here we go. One. First off, we have winner take all districts. That favors the two party system. So basically, congressional districts, if you win the most votes, you win the seat. So if there's a five-way race and you win 33% of the vote, and that's the most, that'd be called a plurality, then you win. That's it. So a two-party system is favored there. So you're trying to win the most votes, and therefore two parties is the best way to do that. And they tend to be large coalitions, more moderate. Whereas if you're an extreme party, then you're probably not going to get many votes anyway. So if you're like the Green Party and you are a center left party, or actually pretty far left party, you might only get 5 or 10% of the vote at most, depending on the district. Well, you're never going to win because somebody's going to get more than that. So people just figure they're throwing away their vote. So it just doesn't matter. Where there's another system we'll talk about, proportional, where winning 10% of the vote gets you 10% of the seats. But winning you 10% of the vote in any district just means you lost. So this is a structural barrier to third party and independent candidates. So winner take all districts, favor two parties, and this is a structural barrier to third party and independent candidates. Like you're much likely to win, more likely to win if you're one of the two parties than if you run as an independent or a third party. You're just going to get a little bit of votes. Matter of fact, most third party or independent candidates just steal votes from one side or the other, and then that might make a party win that otherwise wouldn't have won the district. Now, there is an alternative to that, and that's called proportional systems. Now, we do not have that in America at all, but there are countries that have what's called a proportional system. And in that, you really just kind of vote for the party and their platform, and whatever percentage of vote they get, that's the percentage of seats they get in the parliament or the legislature. So the percent of vote equals the percent of seats. This allows multiple parties to exist and actually encourages people to vote for a more extreme party, because even if they get 5% of the vote, then they get 5% of the seats. By the way, usually most countries have a cutoff. If you get less than 10 or 5%, then you don't get any votes. But if you get more than 5%, you guarantee yourself some seats. I mean, there's some sort of cutoff, sometimes 2%, I don't know. But here's the thing. You also get political parties with more extreme views. Like you might get like an extreme socialist party. Whereas in America, people that are socialist might vote more toward the left party, which is Democrat, but like they don't really get what they want because the Democrat Party is more moderate than that. This is just an example here on the left-hand side. You'll see Italy, and this was a recent election, and it just shows how like look up the center right coalition. So they have a bunch of parties that are like conservative, the right leaning parties, and you can see like the League got 58 seats, so they get 18% of the or they won 18% of the vote, so they get 58 seats. And then Forza Italia got 18.4%, so they get 58 seats. And then Brothers of Italy, they got 5% of the vote, so they get 16 seats. And then Us with Italy, whatever that is, got 1.6%. It's probably a really extreme party. They got 1.6, but they still got 5 seats in the legislature. And then you have like a moderate 5-star movement. I guess that's some sort of moderate party. They had 35% right there. And then you have a center left coalition, and then you have some other ones. And look at down below, there's a party called the Associative Movements Italians Abroad, and they got 0.3% of the vote, and they still got 1 seat in the Italian parliament. So this is proportional systems. And then you have to create a coalition of the parties on left or right in order to get a majority in the legislature. Big problem with this, they often can't keep these coalitions together, and they just can't get anything done. Like they almost never get anything passed because there's too many parties. It's kind of like the old problem that Brutus said. You'd have so many interest groups going at each other that they just argue all the time and never get anything done. There's New Zealand, and you can see the different parties in New Zealand. You have a National Party, a Labour Party, ACT, whatever that is, got one seat. United Future, whatever that is, they got one seat. Green Progressive Alliance. So you see, it depends on what the party system is, but in this case, they have fewer parties than Italy. But then it's also a lot smaller country. All right. So remember also this: a winner-take-all district system favors more centrist ideology, whereas a proportional system like Italy or New Zealand favors more extreme views. Now, maybe the moderate parties win more votes, but the extreme views are much more likely to be represented in a proportional system than extreme views in America. In the United States, we probably just we don't have that many people get elected that are really extreme unless they come from a very, very partisan district. All right. And that leads also 5.18 to third-party platforms. Let's talk about the platforms of third parties. And we're going to do a little bit of history here just to kind of lay out the idea. Third-party platforms, 5.18. Okay, flipping over, getting ready to go. All right. A platform, remember, I think we talked about this already, is a statement of beliefs. So it's a listing of all the things the parties believe in. I believe in another lesson, we actually looked at a little bit of the platforms of the Republican and Democrat Party, or I just showed you a snippet of it. Here's the deal. In America, most third parties are single issue movements. In the United States, most third parties are single issue movements. And I'm going to give you some examples of those. Single issue movement. All right, first off, the Free Soil Party in 1848, which is kind of a forerunner to the Republican Party, had no slavery in the territories. That was their idea. I mean, free soil, right? I mean, that kind of makes sense. They did not want slavery to expand into the territories. This party was created due to the Mexican-American War and the new lands that were gained from the war with Mexico. And so the Free Soil Party was like, we're not going to spread slavery there. Now, ultimately, slavery was spread there, but the Free Soil Party was created to stop that. So it really was just a one-issue party. It actually gained some seats. In 1848, you'll see Martin Van Buren, who was former Democrat president, but was a Free Soil candidate in 1848. He actually won 10% of the vote. They got no electoral votes. He won no states. And then you'll see the House of Representatives, 1848, the Free Soil Party actually won 9 seats. And in 1954, they won 37 seats. And they created a coalition with the Republicans in 1854 in order to get the speakership, which is interesting. In the United States Senate, they actually had some senators, including Millard Fillmore, who will be president. 2 seats, 3 seats, 4 seats, 2 seats, and then they were gone. And then they disappeared because the Republican Party was created. Another party, a little more infamous, the Know Nothing Party in the 1850s. You may have heard of these guys in U.S. history. The Know Nothing Party, 1850s. They were actually against immigration. So they were anti-Catholic. Specifically, when we talk about anti-Catholic and anti-immigrant, we're talking specifically about being against Irish people. And they won 52 seats in the 1854 election in the House of Representatives. I mean, that's a pretty freaking big number of seats. So if you go into the urban areas of the North, this is where that party tended to be a little more popular. The Know Nothing Party, 1850s. By the way, the reason they were called the Know Nothings, that's a great story. They would have secret meetings before they became a political party. And the reason they were called the Know Nothings is people would ask, like, hey, what was going on in that meeting you were in? And then they were told in the meetings that if anybody asked what we talked about, you just say, I know nothing. So like the people who left the meetings kept going around going, I don't know anything. I don't know. I know nothing about this meeting. And so that's where they got the name Know Nothings. You can see here in the 1854 midterm election, the Democrat Party won a plurality. This is like the only time in American history. 1854 is one of the only times in American history where literally we were a multi-party system, like once. Even though we had single districts, we had multi-parties. So we had the Democrat Party, the Whig Party, which was dying out, the American Know Nothing Party, the Republican Party, and the People's Party. And ultimately, a Republican was elected speaker because of a coalition of the Whigs and the Republicans and the Know Nothings. So that kind of how that worked. That's kind of how it worked out. By the way, in 1856, the Republican Party becomes a major party. Before it was a minor party, and that leads to the collapse of both the Whigs and the Know Nothings. And the Republican Party wins a bunch of House seats, but the Democrats actually win control of the House of Representatives. All right, another party in the 19th century. So we have the Free Soil Party, which is like no slavery, the Know Nothings, which were like anti-immigrant. We have the Populist Party. Now 1890s was a group of farmers. You probably heard of them in U.S. AP government. I mean AP history. And this was the end of the gold standard. So that was the gold standard was $1 was tied to a gold coin, and if you took your dollar to a bank, you'd be able to get gold coin. We don't have the gold standard anymore. We got rid of the gold standard. So now a dollar is worth kind of almost like it's on faith. Like we believe the dollar is valuable, so therefore it is. If the government printed too much of it, then we would not have faith in it anymore and inflation would go run rampant. But gold standard kept inflation really low because you only could make a dollar for every gold coin or silver you had, because eventually it was the silver standard as well. And what this did is it ending the gold standard would help farmers. It would help farmers because then you could inflate the currency. Inflating the currency, although a little bit is good, but what it does, it allows you to pay back a loan with dollars that are worth less than the loan when you took it out. So farmers could pay back loans with dollars that were cheaper, whereas with the gold standard, it didn't work that way at all. And so the farmers wanted to end the gold standard. In the end, we do, but not for a long time after this. In 1892 election, when the Populist Party was at its peak, they won about 9% of the vote, but they actually did win some electoral votes. They won 22 electoral votes. You can see where the green is. Those are the states that were won by the Populists. And of course, they were states that are extremely rural and at the time had a lot of farmers. Nevada didn't have Las Vegas yet. All right, 1892. All right, and then more recently, the Reform Party in 1992, their big issue, and this seems kind of funny now with us approaching $30 trillion in debt. Back then it was a couple trillion. The Reform Party's big issue was the debt and the deficit, the national debt and the yearly deficits. 1992. Let's look at that really quick. Pause if you need to. They won no electoral votes. So Ross Perot, who was the candidate, won no states, but he did get almost 19% of the vote and very likely cost Republican George Bush the election. We don't really know for a fact that that's true, but it's likely that a lot of the Ross Perot people were more conservative, and there were a lot of states that were pretty close. And if you threw most of the Ross Perot votes toward Bush, probably would have won. But again, I'm speculating. It may have been that Clinton would have won anyway. Green Party 2000. The Green Party is a left party. It's it focuses on the environment, and so in 2000, the Green Party had a candidate, Ralph Nader, and they didn't do that great nationally. I think it was. Let's look at that actually. Green Party 2000 environment. Pause if you need to write the rest of that down, but let's go take a peek at the election. They had only 2.7% of the vote. So I thought it was less than 3%. Less than 3% of the vote. But the big issue was Florida. So look at how close Florida was. This barely got Bush over the majority in the Electoral College, even though he lost the popular vote by a few 100,000. Bush got 48.85% of the vote. Look at the left in Florida. Al Gore had 48.4%. But look at Ralph Nader. He got 97,000 votes. Bush wins Florida with 537 votes, but the left Green Party won 97,000. Like literally every person in the Green Party would have voted Democrat before they voted Republican. But because they voted Green Party, they gave Florida to Bush, and Bush becomes president completely because of this. And so now some people argue like, well, the Green Party, those people wouldn't have voted. Maybe, but I bet a bunch of them still would have, and they probably would have voted for Al Gore. And so, yeah, they lost. As a result of this election, the Democrat Party has taken in Green Party ideas big time, because they wanted to make sure that the Green Party doesn't cost them a state again. All right, and by the way, that brings me to the last point of this lesson, which is this: major parties will incorporate third-party platforms. So the Populist Party platform of End the Gold Standard became part of the Democrat platform. The Reform Party debt and deficit became something the Republicans stressed in the 1990s. Of course, even Bill Clinton, in the Democrat, who was president, stressed that as well. So that's why we ended up with budget surpluses in the 90s, because of the Reform Party. Like, it was like the Reform Party lost, but like in the end, their issue wins. The environmental issues of the Green Party ends up becoming part of the Democrat platform. The Free Soil Party, with no slavery in the territories, becomes something that appeals to the Republican Party, and that becomes the basis of the Republican Party. So the point is that the issues of the third parties end up becoming something that the major parties take over, because if they have these third parties, it could cost them elections, and the other side that wouldn't win wins, like in the case of Florida with Al Gore and George W. Bush. All right, awesome. That is a little history on third parties. So study that up. Be ready for some quizzing and practicing. Thank you.